Implementing technologies into a complex environment like mining is a huge challenge.
What mistakes do you see companies repeatedly making when they attempt to implement new technologies?
There are some serious, brilliant people out there developing really impactful technology. Because a lot of times these guys come from outside of mining, they sometimes get bogged down into that and don't actually realize that within mining it's actually might be a little different. It's great for your technology to work in a vacuum or in your own country where you're all set up and ready to go. But here in Latin America, the deposits here are very challenging. Latin America and Chile, it's a civil law society, and that bureaucratic is extremely important.
Adam is the founder of MTC Mining Technology Consultants. He has been directly involved in implementing autonomous fleets and precision mining technologies at some of the largest mining operations in the world, from business case development and financial modeling to full-scale implementation, change management, and operational handover. His experience includes supporting major copper operations in Chile and internationally, working closely with OEMs, operational teams, and executive teams to bridge the gap between technology, potential, and operational reality. Today, we're going to go deeper into his experience, what he's working on, where the industry is heading, and what mining companies and technology providers need to understand if they want to succeed in autonomous and precision mining. Why do most technologies never scale beyond one pilot?
That change management piece is really key. It can really slow down a pilot, it can derail a pilot.
What determines whether it moves forward or it dies quietly?
Maturity of the technology and the company, a strong, solid business case, focus those business cases on the life of the mine.
What is currently happening in the industry in terms of technology adoption?
I'm seeing that there's less patience for going on that journey and more of a push for, hey, show me that you can work and add value right away.
If you could provide some tips for technology companies entering the region, what would it be?
Stop doing ROI. Really think about the value that you're adding and how it's going to impact the mine, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. Version 1 is great because that's something to jump off of. Be patient but quick.
What are some of the areas that your company provides services in?
So MTC works with mining companies on their technology journey. We support them from strategy, market study, technology selection, business case development, implementation plan. If there's challenges with Human or Ceremi, we support in that. And our goal is to ensure that the handover and the implementation and final handover technology is done safely and sustainably. We also, on another hand, we also work with the METS companies, so mining, equipment, technology, and services, mainly the focus on technology. We help them build their internal technical project capabilities because there's nothing worse, especially when you're on the mining side, than a great technology coming to you and basically asking you to build up their internal capabilities, right? It's a lot more calming when they come with a plan for an implementation plan, a change management plan, critical spare parts, things like that. It helps expedite the implementation time and expedite the sales cycle.
So you have worked on both sides of mining operations, selecting and implementing technology, and now as a consultant supporting METS companies. How has that dual perspective shaped the way you approach technology and how it's deployed?
Okay, so good question. I've had the pleasure of seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, as you said, on both sides of the fence, both as a miner and as a consultant. And I mean, implementing technologies into a complex environment with like mining with lots of intricacies and moving parts is a huge challenge. And what I've learned is that there's a lot of smart people creating brilliant, impactful technologies, but a lot of times that brilliance clouds the real push into mining or the real added value into mining, and it's because there's a lack of understanding of those intricacies. Anything that you do is never going to be perfect, but if at least we can start with, as I was saying before, building those internal technical capabilities, even if you can start with version 1, it always helps into move. And so what I really think is that these METS companies need to really be coming in with a really solid, strong business case, but also at a certain level, a change management plan. because that soft part is what's really going to help in the sustainability of that technology.
So from your experience, what do technology companies misunderstand most about mining operations?
One thing that I've seen, and I want to say that, they fail or struggle, but I mean, a lot of times mining companies present their technology and it's wonderful, but they really need to focus on building a stronger or demonstrating a stronger technical proposal. Because look, it's great for your technology to work in a vacuum or in your own country where you're all set up and ready to go. But here in Latin America, the deposits here are very challenging. And don't forget that Latin America and Chile, it's a civil law society. So paperwork and that bureaucratic process, even within the mining industry, is extremely, extremely important, right? And so I just feel that there's a lack of understanding of that side. And honestly, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen so many business cases with ROI, right? Again, understand a lot of these porphyries are in their primary ore body, material's hard, grade is declining, and so we really want to see the impact, not in a encapsulated area, but across the entire life of the mine. Like, where is that value? And so I think that there needs to be a bit of a paradigm shift in there with the met companies. So that's,
We're going to get back to the ROI and how that can go into the value of the mine site. But I wanted to also ask you, if you were advising a technology company looking to enter Chile or Latin America, what would you tell them about how mining companies really choose technology?
Look, depending on the maturity of the technology, it can be different. However, there are a few staples, right? Business case has to be solid. There has to be a business case showing value. And again, I strongly believe that a strong technical approach will always sell itself, because that brings calm to the technical side of mining and how we go through the different project phases. So I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, it's important to have those internal technical capabilities that can, one, either be transferred over to the mining company to support them on their own technology journey and change management process and implementation process, but also help further develop it internally, so within the mine. Again, it's a hard one to say, but depending on the maturity, technical capability internally, strong business case, okay? And one thing that is always good and that I like is having that local presence, especially when we start a technology. It's good to see that, I don't want to say this, but I know a lot of people like working with partners, but it's great to see the company themselves here putting in their time, getting their hands dirty, and ensuring that the project is successful and going through. Right. So I think those are important. They're not the end all and be all in the selection, but they do play a key part. The biggest one, though, would have to be strong business case, implementation plan, okay, and change management. If I could boil it down to three, that would be it.
Right, and taking that into consideration, what mistakes do you see companies repeatedly making when they attempt to implement new technologies?
Okay, like I said earlier, there are some serious, brilliant people out there developing really impactful technology. And some of the mistakes that I see is that because a lot of times these guys come from outside of mining, or they're so focused on their technology and what it can, and how, and the solution that it can provide, they sometimes get bogged down into that and don't actually realize that, within mining, it's actually might be a little different. And instead of adding value to A, you would be adding value to 8.5, B, and C. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Because again, if you don't really understand the intricacies of how a mine operates, it's hard, it's easy to get lost in it, you know what I mean? And it's easy to not sing the right song. And the worst part is, what if the person on the other end doesn't actually understand or see the additional value of the technology, right? So a lot of times they just don't put their best foot forward, because there's a misalignment in how their technology add value to the mines. That's from my experience.
Interesting.
At least. I'm speaking for myself. I just
Yeah, and to have a route or to be able to have that to play that song correctly, how important is the proof of concept or the first pilot?
That's make or break at times for your company, right? And I know it's extremely exciting when that opportunity comes, but it's extremely important that it's approached, one, with patience, okay? And again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but a strong technical approach on the implementation side and the change management side. Because, the worst is to have a pilot, let's say the mine allows you to run a pilot for, let's say, 18 months. But for the first 10 months, we're building up, I don't know, maintenance plans, critical spare parts. We're having connectivity and integration problems because, the back end wasn't fully understood, or, now all of a sudden the maintenance or infrastructure teams are asking for documentation on how the technology works and integrates with their own processes. Those types of things slow the pilot down. And all it does is over time discredit or dilute your credibility. And then that technical uplift that technology can provide gets lost in all the soft parts and all the soft stuff of the pilot. So that the pilot is super important. And again, sometimes METS companies don't understand how those pilots come about, because I've seen sometimes, certain areas, whether it be maintenance or in the ops, they have a little bit of money in the budget hanging around, and there's been a technology company harassing them or bothering them for a while. So they say, you know what, let's give this a go. But when you're going it about that way, and the corporate or the mothership, the head office is not involved, or the right area is not involved to support that pilot, it falls by the wayside, right? And so, look, to sum up my rant, I would say when there's a pilot, super important, be patient, but run fast. And to run fast, ensure that you have those right processes and technical documents in place.
Great. And to take into consideration the mining company's perspective, why do most technologies never scale beyond one pilot?
Okay, so I can speak from my own personal experience. This was a different time in mining, but I know that it still resonates because I've seen it also as a consultant. Look, I hate to sound again like a broken record, but that change management piece is really key, right? It can really slow down a pilot. It can derail a pilot. That additional support, if it's not there, that can really fail, right? And that's why, like, to your other question, I know partners at times, depending on the size of your company, is at times seems like the best way to go. Oh, we'll find a partner, we'll run a small market study, or maybe via them we can get a pilot going and train up their guys to do it, and maybe we can send people from Australia or Canada when it's really time to get it done. But the problem with that is, again, your technology. You know what value it adds. So what's the point, one, of trying to run a market study to see you know your technology? One, I know it's good, it's a good practice, but this is just, again, how I feel.
Right.
One. Number two, when you work with partners, there's always the risk of one, your priority not being the same as their priority, and them not knowing the technology as well as you do, right? And so I have seen multiple times, both as a miner and as a consultant, where we're all excited to run a pilot on a project, but the biggest challenge is actually the partner, because again, maybe they're not as big or have the right technical internal capability to support. And again, they have their own priorities, right? Winning and getting that sale across is important, but life is life.
When a new technology is presented internally, what determines whether it moves forward or it dies quietly?
Maturity of the technology and the company, right? Because you're also investing in the company. Business case, a strong, solid business case. And again, from my perspective, I like to focus those business cases on the life of the asset, because we want to evaluate the value and the impact of the technology across the life of the mine. right? ROI doesn't really help me because again, there's a lot of parts, there's a lot of moving parts in the mine, right? Very dynamic and different processes along the value chain. So an ROI encapsulates, right? It's like a snapshot in time.
Right.
So that's why, to me, a business case where the foundation is based on the life of mine is a key part to the decision making.
And I see that for you probably it's not that important, the ROI, to value the mine itself or the asset. Could you go more into how the ROI is not that important, probably for your experience? Maybe there's some other way that you can value the mine?
Well, look, return on investment is still important, but from my perspective, again, I'm not looking at it from a VC point of view or an investor point of view, but from a technical point of view, I really want to know not the return on the money. It's important, the money that I'm getting back on this investment, but really analyzing the value across the life of the mine. Because look, mines change, strategies change, how we move material or the equipment and technology we use will change. Obviously the foundation stays the same, but those things change. So it's good to get an idea of how this technology can have an impact throughout the entire life of that mine. Right? And we can also put in studies and sensitivities to understand, let's say for a machine, when and how we do the overhaul, when it's time to do those installs. Right? So I just think that, yes, ROI is important. I'm not trying to downplay that. But for me personally, I like to see the impact on the life of the mine.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And now going back into your experience, where do most implementation processes break down? In the planning, installation?
Look, planning, installation, they all have their challenges, but it all ties back to change management.
Okay.
Right? Because in my experience, the projects, implementations of technologies where we started that change management process, even before we got we raised the PO to buy the technology, that has always been the most successful because you're early on getting buy-in. And so once you have that buy-in and that support and those champions in those different areas, the planning is less likely to fail because you're getting a lot of support from different areas of the mine. So it's not so overwhelming, all those moving parts of the mine. Right? So if that is strong and well constructed, then all those other parts will fall into place instead of off to the side. I believe.
What would you say resistance is more common at the operator level, at the supervisory level, middle management?
Look, I would have a base of across, because across all layers in the mining in the mining industry. But at different impacts, right? Because at the end of the day, what is it that we're doing in mining, right? We're moving material and getting the ore, right? So our focus is always meters and tons, right? And then you get the processing side, the recovery. So, but at each level, there's a different impact or a different type of resistance that comes, because technology, especially disruptive technology, is new and different, and that's scary. You don't know how that's going to impact your job, your bonuses, how your mind's going to operate next year, whether it aligns with your bosses or the corporate strategy, right? So there's different parts to resistance. And again, at different times along the mining cycle, that changes as well. And again, if there's a solid plan in place or again, change management, if there's a solid plan in place, then a lot of those can be pre-thought or dealt with in advance in order to reduce the impact that can be seen from the technology, which then reduces the resistance and more buy-in. And again, man, we're all human, right? Like I said, it's new, it's scary, but with a good conversation and education and understanding of all those intricacies and moving parts at all level, right? Even at the operator level, it's important to include them in the long-term strategy so that they know that they're part of it, and that'll reduce that resistance, right? It's important to let them know that there's going to be, yeah, okay, fine, this might change, but there's going to be an upskilling involved, learning new skills and new technology, new software, new programs. But then even on the engineering side, learning something new, if they're able to understand and see the value or how that helps their business as usual, then there's going to be a lot more buy-in. And again, that just goes back to solid change management plan, strong communication, right? And again, just to clarify, when I say change management, I'm not talking about that big change management that the big consulting companies do, right? Where it's top down and they're trying to ensure that, it's part of that long-term strategy. I really like to focus on the up, right? How is this technology, how can we ensure that this technology that's in the pit is going to integrate into that high level plan? And how can we be preemptive about it? If we know that's coming, how can we start to create the right documentation and processes or communication plans? Or I don't know, certain human documentation to ensure that there's more buy-in and it's a smooth implementation.
Right. And for our last two questions, I want to ask you, what is currently happening in the industry in terms of technology adoption?
Okay, so that's a very good question. And in my experience, especially when I first started in the technology space, there was a bit more, I feel, there was a bit more of an appetite of working with the technology companies, a bit more hand-holding, a bit more patience in the time in how we get this technology in. Now, despite the high commodity prices, I feel that there is this, I don't want to say pressure, but this pseudo stress of this technology needs to be pretty much off the shelf, ready, plug in, plug out. Now, each mining company has a different division, their ventures and all that can work with very early stage technologies, but that's different, right? I'm talking about in the operation, getting some, autonomous equipment or sensing equipment into the mine. Back in the day, like I was saying, there was a bit more patience and resources within the mining company to work with the technologies to make it successful. Right. And now there's this kind of pressure that these technologies need to be off the shelf, plug in and ready to go. But the mining companies, I feel, don't have that same patience. One, because margins are a lot lower, and also, let's call a spade, right? The industry has its cycles, and there's a lot of movement and upsizing and downsizing that's constantly happening, right? Despite the commodity prices, there's a lot of mining companies shrinking. And then what does that mean? That means when these new technology companies are coming in and they're outside of mining and they need the right support, the mining companies don't have it. Or a senior person that could have helped was let go, and a young person has come in, which is great, but they're still finding their feet. So the internal skill set that once was always there, or may have been one or two guys, or may have been a lot more to support, is no longer there, right? So I'm seeing this pressure to do that, but then at the same time, not all technology is plug and ready to go, but at the same time, if you could show that there's a pathway to it, I think there's a bit of an appetite of that, that could help the implementation go. But again, just back to your core question, sorry, I'm circling around. Back to your core question, I'm seeing that there's less patience for going on that journey for these technology companies, and more of a push for, hey, show me that you can work and add value right away.
And if you could provide some tips for technology companies entering the region, what would it be?
Look, again, me on my own. Even when I've been on both sides, I think it's important to have an entity, right? For so many reasons, especially like I said earlier, Chile is a civil law society, and safety in this part of the world is is key. Safety is important all across mining, but in Latin America, it is at the forefront, right? And just having an entity over here on the legality side and getting you onto site is a lot easier. And it also shows a lot, it shows better, it presents better to the mine, right? That you're also making a real commitment in being on this journey. I would also recommend stop doing ROI. I know maybe your VCs or your investors want to see that return, but stop it. Really think about the value that you're adding and how it's going to impact the cash flow of the mine or impact the mine, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do. Yeah, of course, making money is important, but we're trying to add value to the industry that we love. And another one, again, have a strong technical process in place. It doesn't have to be perfect because there's nothing scarier than a blank page, right? Version 1 is great. Version 1 is great because that's something to jump off of. So I think that also, presents well. And another thing I would say is be patient but quick, right? Like, I will never begin. I can't say I know the pressure that they feel when they have the VCs and investors, etc. But really be patient about how you go about making those decisions to implement your technology, right? I have seen a lot of people, saying to the mine, oh yeah, we'll cut corners. I don't want to say they're cutting corners, but because they're so afraid to lose the opportunity, sometimes they commit to things that they can't do. So just be patient about it, but move quick. Right? Like, be calm, see where the challenge is, and develop the right steps to go forward. Because cutting corners doesn't help anybody. More importantly, it doesn't help the end client, and we need them to be happy.
Right. Great. That was a lot of insights. Very, very important information, and it was great to have you here. Thank you for the interview, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.